Welcome to Catholics Coast to Coast, where we just love to hang out and kind of take our time milling around inside of Podcast Central, finding some of the best conversations to help deepen your Catholic faith, and also a chance for you to make some friends along the way. I'm Ace McKay, glad to be a part of the ride. Before we dive into this week's conversations, let's get a look at the Mass readings for this weekend as we get a look at your word on the Word.
So before we get started this morning, I just wanted to say thanks for making coffee for me earlier.
It's no problem.
I was running late and I was a little frantic, and I guess you picked up on that and made the offer to help me out. And I know it's really insignificant considering this Sunday's gospel, but I just wanted to let you know I really appreciated it.
You're welcome. Hi, I'm Veronica, and this is Melissa. Welcome to the Word on the Word. Today, we're going to take a look at the gospel story for this Sunday about the healing of the 10 lepers.
Luke writes that Jesus met 10 lepers when entering a village. They begged Jesus to heal him. Jesus told them to go to the priest, and on the way there, all of them were healed.
Immediately, one man went back and thanked Jesus. But Jesus asked him, where are the others? And the gospel text gives us no context as to where they were. So Jesus looks at the man and says, go on your way. Your faith has made you well.
You know, this kind of reminds me of kids on Christmas morning. They get so excited to finally open their gifts and they run off to play with them at once. And sometimes the parents have to remind them to say, thank you, to the person who gave them the gift.
I know what you mean. Sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in this energetic moment and forget to say thanks. Like, when was the last time that something good happened and you went to church and thanked God for it?
This week, we challenge you to give thanks to God for something that has happened in your life.
And we'll see you next week here on EWTN.
Bye.
Toodles.
Continuing our jubilant year, great stuff from Word on the Word. You can find it wherever you stream for your podcast, or simply go to Podcast Central, EWTN.com/podcast, and of course subscribe so you don't miss future episodes or catch up on what you might have missed. All right, I'm Ace McKay. As we dive into this week's Catholics Coast to Coast, we're going to dare great things. And this podcast is something that this week, whether we like it or not, we can look at leadership and realize that we are leading others. So with others around, how do we take parts of our lives and then invest into that, whether that great or small? And in that, let us know that we're not alone in those responsibilities so that we can help to inherit each other through the challenges that we face. So as teamwork makes the dream work, let's dive in. It is Dare Great Things on Catholics Coast to Coast.
Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Whether we like it or not, leadership means standing alone. Of course, we need to lead others, and so others are always a part of our lives. But whenever you take the lead in things great or small, you end up facing the fact that you alone are responsible for the change that you have initiated. That solitude can be uncomfortable for many, but for a Christian, it becomes a meeting place with Jesus Christ and an essential aspect of our spirituality as leaders. And this is especially true when we find ourselves at the center of an organization. Thanks so much for taking the time to invest in yourselves and learn more about what it means to become a saint while you are in leadership. And I know that those two terms don't always go together. Usually we think of holiness or sanctity as something that's of the heart, of a matter that it happens when we pray. It's kind of a relationship that's a bit apart from the practicalities of our lives. But I'd like to challenge that, because I actually think that you become holy when you engage in the mission field where Christ has put you. Imagine if he invited you into his harvest, and then you thought that being holy was when you weren't engaged in the harvest. And yet the harvest master has literally recruited you to be busy about his harvest. Now, if that's the case, then he's expecting us who are engaged in his harvest to swing our sickle, to be serious about what we have to do. If we're a high school student, then we need to be doing our homework and we need to be passing our exams. If we're a high school teacher, then we need to be preparing our lessons and teaching our classes, right? Like you can't get around the fact that wherever we are, it's in our mission field that we're going to be sanctified. Which means many people kind of think that holiness belongs to monks and to nuns. And I'd like to say, of course, if you'd like to do that, well, then become a monk or a nun. I mean, it's not that hard. You just have to give up everything and then you're fine. but like, if you're not called to be a monk or a nun, well, then a lot of folks, then they say, well, how am I supposed to become holy? And usually in our mind, it's when we imitate the monks or the nuns in our practical lives. Like when we go to church, when we go to mass, when we go to adoration, we say that that's where I'm going to become holy. And then when we're changing diapers or we are organizing a lesson plan or when we are actually engaged in doing the jobs that we do, then we kind of feel like, well, that's just us kind of spinning the wheel of the world. And I want to challenge that straight up because that is so contrary to the whole, all of Christianity. That's not what Christianity teaches. That's not what the Bible teaches. It's not what the Catholic Church teaches, certainly. That's quite the contrary. In fact, what the Catholic Church teaches is that the vocation of the lay person, that is, a person who's not a monk or a nun, is a legitimate path to holiness. And you say, well, how do you become holy when you're not engaged in holy things? And the answer is to make the non-holy things that you're doing to have the savor and the echo of the holiness of God, to bring salvation into a broken world, to bring holiness into a non-holy world. It means that you have to become a missionary and accept the missionary call of the layperson. And this is really, really difficult for us mentally to get over because the culture that we've inherited in most of our spirituality is not a culture that comes with that perspective. Most of us think that holiness is something esoteric or something that belongs to the otherworldly, and so we keep it in a box of the unattainable. And meanwhile, we spend our lives with opportunity in front of us to literally live, as an instrument of Christ in our workspace, in our office, at our desk, in our relationships, in our meetings, right? With our plans, with our expansion, with our employment opportunities, with our HR issues, with everything that's the stuff, right, that we're given each day. And we need to look at that like clay. That's the clay that I'm called to mold into the image of Christ. Right? What if my colleagues all thought that they were working with someone who knew Jesus? Can you imagine the power of that? If the people that worked with me actually thought that they came into an encounter with the love of God every time that they came near to me, well, it would be kind of normal, right? If that's what we are Christians, that's kind of what we're supposed to be doing. And yet we who are in that position, oftentimes we feel as if we're failing, as if we're not doing that. And I agree, it is a real challenge point. I mean, it's all fun and games to talk this talk, but then when you become a mother and you've got 6 little kids running around, crazy, and your life is complete chaos and you can't sleep at night, etc., it's a real challenge to think this is actually sanctifying, that I'm close to God. Well, I'd just say it's a very similar thing when you're a salesperson and you're on the road constantly doing presentations to sell whatchamacallits. It's easy to think of your life in a trivial fashion, or your spirituality as something that's really, how do you convince someone who's selling whatchamacallits for a living? And I'm not talking about the candy bar here. There's no endorsement of any particular form of chocolate. But if you're selling whatever, the widget that you're selling or the service that you're selling, how do you convince that person that they're doing the will of God? Right? That's a really hard thing because everything that you're feeling is contrary to it. You feel as if you're immersed in the murkiness of the world. And so it seems so tempting to think that, in fact, the holiness is going to be found when you leave that behind and can finally retire and then basically become a monk or a nun. Like, it's really ingrained in our Catholic psychology that holiness is this image of a person that's not like us. And I want to shake that up because that is not true. In fact, when you look at the life of Christ on earth, he was a man who was very much engaged in the things of his time. Now, he wasn't doing a business per se, But then again, he was busy about the things of his day. He had to worry about feeding his apostles. He had to worry about where he was going to go next. He had to deal with constant issues, people on the outside that were pressuring him. On the inside, a feeling the apostles not necessarily following, very adroitly anyway in his footsteps. You could say that to be the least. He had all kinds of issues that were in front of him, towns that would close him out, where he had to sleep in the field, so to speak, or at least in a deserted place. He had to balance and showed us that what it means. I mean, he was standing in front of kings. He was standing in front of paupers. He was standing in front of social outcasts. He was in front of social zealots. And he had to deal with the fabric of his society at that day, of his day. And he didn't shirk from that duty. You might look at his life as something that's very different than yours. And of course, yes, he wasn't always exemplifying the lay vocation. But remember that for 30 years of silence and solitude, he lived that. He supplied for his mother in the absence of St. Joseph, wherever we don't know exactly what happened to him, but he seems to have disappeared from the scene by the time Christ, erupted onto the scene for his preaching. So in any case, he had to take care of his mother, and he lived the life of the son of a carpenter in Nazareth. This would have entailed plying his trade, dealing with colleagues, dealing with customers, and then mastering the art of carpentry, or of building, as it was known in his day. Right, so I mean, he shouldered that burden for 30 years, right? So it's also not accurate to say that Jesus's life is not an example for us. In fact, it's the perfect example for us, even if your call is to engage in the ways of this world. And I would say, especially if your call is to engage in the ways of this world. Jesus lived a full life. He lived an active life. He lived a life that was a part of the fabric of his society. And he shows us that the way of holiness of the business leader, the way of the holiness of any leader who's involved in the things of this world, the leader of a family, the leader of a social entity, whatever it might be, it's first of all found by engaging in that activity. It's not by absenting ourselves from where Christ has put us in our high schools, in our families, in our social situations. It's not from absenting that we're going to find holiness. In fact, it's by bringing the holiness into those settings that we find the place where Christ has put us. He's looking for people who will dare to be his instruments in the social fabric of our society. That's the splendid vocation of the layperson. But to do that, we have to embrace the fact that we need to lead there, that we can't just put it on the side. And when we lead, we're going to find ourselves finding him in the solitude of our leadership.
Would you like to hear more from Father Nathan? Join the St. John Leadership Network and receive a 2-minute glance at the gospel every Sunday morning right to your phone. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
Now, those of you who have been with me here for the past, few sessions where we've been talking about this, and I'm going through this like a class for you, right? Embracing solitude. This is the last of our segments on this particular subject. And what I've done is I've talked about the different kinds of solitude that we encounter anytime that we step forward into leadership. And if, just briefly reviewing, right? Like I talked about the solitude of having an idea. That's really, very painful, because as soon as you have an idea, you also have critics who sit around and say that your idea is not going to work, right? So you have to persevere in that. And then the solitude of having a plan. It's nice to have ideas, but when you actually say it's going to be this way of proceeding in these circumstances, well, that's risky, right? Which puts you with the third type of solitude, which is solitude of taking risks. When you actually sign on the line and step forward with your idea, you now become, capable of being judged. And that's really a lonely place to be. It's a lot easier, in a sense, to stay with a plan or to stay with the idea than it is to be the person who says, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to actually support this. My time, my energy, my reputation is on the line here. But and yet if we don't do that, we don't lead, right? We don't act. We stay in the nebulous zone of good thoughts, right? But a leader in Christ is called to do more than good thinking. We're supposed to start things. And then we have to go through the pain of the grind and the sacrifice necessary to bring that to fruition. And you realize that if it's going to be this great idea that you had at the beginning, well, it's going to cost you. And there's a solitude there, too, of saying, well, I'm going to actually lay down what I need to lay down in order to make this happen. And I'm going to pay that price. But there's a fifth type of solitude, and I want to focus in with you today. And it's a solitude that comes from when you start to create or pass on, right, the spirit that's within you. You create a team. You create a community, you create an organization around you of other people. Now, this might be very small. And I want to make sure you understand this. Leadership here, I like to speak about business leadership because that's what you all are, right? You're all business leaders. And sometimes you're the forgotten members of our society, right? It's like you're Catholic and then you put the business on the side, right? Somehow or other, there's a lot of preaching today about that. And priests and religious leaders don't seem to always really understand the value of what it does in business, or what it takes to succeed in business. I do, which is why at the St. John Leadership Network, this is what we're all about. We're trying to sanctify you in your task in business. But I don't want you to think leadership is just for business leaders, because I also know you all are parents, right? Or your spouses, most of you anyway. And for those who are single, in the class here, you have a call to be a member of society, and you're still a member of a family. And I want to make sure you understand leadership extends to anywhere we act in an intentional way to create an influence. Anywhere where there's an impact that follows after our intentional action, we are leading. We're shaping the world around us, right? And so and anytime you do that, well, of course, you're going to be interacting with other people. I love this definition of leadership one of my mentors gave me once. He said, you know what leadership is? It's real simple. And I said, what's that? And he said, you take a look around, or you take a look behind you, over your shoulder, and then you see, is anyone following? If someone's following, then you're leading. And I thought, that it's kind of catchy, right? Like, because it's true. You don't not just a leader because you have great thoughts, great plans, great drive. You're a leader because you're influencing other people who are around you, right? And so as soon as you do that, well, an essential part of your leadership is that connectivity. I always think about this poll that the Gallup people did way back in the day about what leadership is. And it was amazing because they came up with the 4 attributes that people kind of coalesced around, saying these 4 things will make you a leader. And the number 1 attribute that every leader has to have, according to this huge poll and study that they did, the number 1 attribute is you have to have vision. And of course, that makes sense, right? Because leadership's about going somewhere. If you don't know where you're going, it's a sure thing you can't lead anyone there, right? And then the 4th attribute, the first was vision, the 4th was passion. You got to believe in it. You got to want it, right? And it's funny because most people think that that's what leadership is. You're kind of this person full of vision and drive, right? And you're therefore a leader, but that's not true. The number 2 and the number 3 essential aspects of a leader all have to do with your followers, meaning that the number 2 attribute of a leader, the second attribute after vision, is whether or not you can be trusted. And the third is whether or not you trust your people. I think it's amazing. Being trusted and being trusting, your relationship with those who follow you is as essential as your vision and your passion. And I underscore that, because we're all here to raise up saints to lead. That's what our mission is, the St. John Leadership Network, raise up saints to lead. But that doesn't mean just raise up visionary people who have these great ideas. It means raising up people who are able to relate to the people who are underneath them and behind them, who are able to inspire them with passing on the same vision and the same passion that they have into the hearts of those who follow them. That's when you're going to be the most impactful. Right? And of course, that doesn't mean you're always right. And there's definitely times your vision and your passion might be misguided. You might be over the top. You might be aiming at the wrong goal. I mean, it's not because you have a vision and passion that you're a leader. But supposing your vision and your passion are correct, well, you're going to be effective to the degree that you help people to follow in that you bring people along with you. This is so essential. And I love that because it tempers everything down. It's no longer just about you and what you feel inside. It's very much and even more about your followers and you adapting what you see and what you want to a way that allows other people to enter into it as if it was something that they saw and that they wanted. And the more you're able to do that, well, the more impact your life is going to have. And of course, we always remember that the impact is not the goal, like we control it in and of itself, but the impact is a desired outcome. You know, you want to be able to leave a legacy behind that your kids follow in your footsteps, right? Not just in the sense of what you've accomplished on the outside, but also in the sense of what you've learned on the inside, the wisdom that you have and that you want to pass on. I know so many, folks, they get into their 60s and 70s and they've achieved, they've succeeded, they've done it, and they look around and their kids don't care, or their followers are just kind of detached, and they come to me asking, Father, how can I pass on what I've learned, and that becomes a real driving force for the final push of their impact in society. It's to pass on what they've learned and what they've gleaned over the years. And it's a very beautiful, image, because I think that really speaks to us about what God wants and what God gives us to do as leaders. He puts a fire in our hearts, and then he kindles that fire and he hones it so that then it spreads and then it gets left. But to do that, well, we need to embrace another form of solitude. I call it the solitude of the center. And what it means is that anytime that you take the effort, or you make the effort to literally try to inculcate and raise up leaders after you, to pass on your vision, your passion, your drive, your inspiration to other people, well, you kind of find yourself alone. You find yourself a little bit, well, in a position like that our Lord was in, right? Here he saw the Father. He knew the Father, and he was trying to pass that on to the hearts of the apostles, to teach them what he had inside. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you are Jesus by any stretch of the imagination, but there's an analogy at that one point that anytime that you're trying to bring people together in a common vision, all right, or bring people together in a common endeavor, you have to be willing to stand in the center. And that's a type of solitude I want to explore with you, because I think it's a meeting point with us and Christ.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
When our Lord was on the earth, he came to establish a church. I think that's really important for us to understand. But now, and there's a lot of theological debate about this, right? But I understand and respect different traditions about this. But from the Catholic point of view, because I am, after all, a Catholic priest, the Catholic point of view is that organization, that visible structure of a society, of a social entity called the church, which for the Catholic Church is visible. It's something you get enrolled in and baptized in a location by a valid minister who then says that I have baptized you into this faith. You have this gift. There's something that's visible, that's understandable about it, which is why Catholics have to get married in a church. Otherwise, it's not a valid marriage. And people can get upset about that and say that they love each other, etc. But it's the idea is that you belong to something that is itself an entity, an organization that's visible, that has spiritual powers. Okay, and that's the Catholic understanding of things. And that was the intention of Christ, that he came to build this visible society of a structure. And which is why, from the Catholic perspective, again, and I know there's a lot of different perspectives out there, right? But the Catholic perspective on things is that the Roman Catholic Church is the oldest organization in the world. Right, it's the continual organized structure with a passage of power, right, from one bishop to the next, going all the way back to Christ and stretching all the way into our bishops today. Right, this is what we profess, and as part of our faith. And that, why is that so important? That's so important because that shows us that our understanding of leadership is always related to other people. that when Jesus Christ, the King of Kings, came to rule, he didn't die as a romantic visionary casting a thought, pattern onto the earth. He died as someone who was willing to build an organized structure of an organization and wanted to leave that behind as his mission for evangelization. That his mission was to build a church, and that through that church, he would continue to work his influence upon the world. This was his intention. Through an organization of people, he would share his spirit, and the effects of his grace would flow like rivers from this fountain, which was his church. If he's the water and the grace is the water, it's flowing up and through a fountain. And that fountain is the visible structure of his church. So again, this is a Catholic perspective, and everyone has their own traditions, but you can see the thought pattern here. That this means that we who are leading in the footsteps of Christ need to always be thinking about the impact we're having through that mission on other people. And this requires from us a special mindset. The mindset of saying, it's not enough for me just to say, I'm throwing truth out there. I need to speak truth to you. And also, I'm not just creating programs and hoping people will come. I'm shaping programs that are of use to you. And the way that then we interface and bring our programs, our truth, our communication, all the efforts of evangelization into the hearts of people involves very much us getting out of the way of ourselves and adapting what we need to say to the way that the people are listening, right? The needs of the people whom we're intending on bringing into this great community. It requires a lot of sensitivity, and it requires also an act of great humility, because the love that we have for Christ impels us to be like St. Paul, who said, I have become all things to all men so that I might save some. Right? But that's very hard to do. It'd be much easier to say, look at how good I am at preaching, or look at how good I am at running organizations, or look at how many things I can do, right? We can treat leadership a little bit from a worldly perspective, like a talent show. I can balance the budget. I can do all these great things. And congratulations, that's really great. But are you doing them for others? Right? Because if I do them for others, I have to modulate the pride that's often at the root of what I'm doing, to really hit the heart of the people as they need it to be given to them. I really have to just fall in love with my people. This is really what it comes down to. A Christian leader is a person who loves other people. And loving other people is always hard for us, especially if you have a vision, and especially if you're a driven individual. If you have a desire to dare something great for Christ, well, you're going to get in your own way unless you put love in the equation. Real love for other people. And that's going to make you feel as if, well, you're very much, alone. Because if you're putting love for other people there, then you're always the one who feels like they're sacrificing, feels like they're bending over backwards, feels like they have to modulate, because you do. You become solitary like a father in the family, or like a mother in the family. It's like, it's all about the kids. Well, in a real way, a Christian leadership is all about the people that are following you. I mean, it's not all about them, but then again, it's a lot about them. It's half about them, right? Like, you have to want to get them to a place and to help them, but then you need to really stand in the center alone with the Lord. There's that image of Jesus that I love very much, the pie pelicane, the sweet pelican. And the image is that the pelican needs to feed the young ones that are there around him. And so, not having any other way to feed them without any food, the pelican pricks his own breast so that his blood becomes the food for the baby pelicans. And then, of course, he dies when the baby pelicans live. That's the solitude of the center. That's the solitude of the person who says, it's not about me. It's not about getting a blue ribbon. It's not about being acclaimed as the greatest leader of all time. It's about passing on this life that is the life of God, like Jesus, who on the cross passed on his life to his church. So we're supposed to make that impact, but it means get out of the way.
The solitude, that can be uncomfortable for many, but for a Christian, it becomes the meeting place with Jesus. Great stuff from Dare Great Things. You can find that podcast at Podcast Central. Go to EWTN.com/podcast or subscribe wherever you like to stream. And of course, you won't miss future episodes. I'm Ace McKay. When Catholics Coast to Coast returns, we're going to check in with the Catholic Momcast as Guillermo and Will debuts this weekend. It is a groundbreaking dual language puppet show that actually is designed to help kids engage with God's world in English and Spanish. So we're going to find out more about Guillermo and Will with the Catholic Momcast when Catholics Coast to Coast returns.
If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
And now, another soulful psalm from Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers.
The Soulful Psalms, we take one of the Psalms from the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, and we connect that Psalm to your everyday lived experience. You know, the Psalms we hear in every holy sacrifice at the Mass, the Psalms are always part of that. And so what better way to engage our faith deeply, personally, intimately by taking a closer look at the Psalms. And what's great is that this segment of the show, the Soulful Psalms, is long, and also with the Beacon of Truth playlists, are both their own podcasts. You can stream them anywhere that you listen to podcasts, or you can go to Podcast Central at the EWTN.com website. Well, today, my friends, we're going to take a quick look at, or continue our look at Psalm 49. Psalm 49 is one of the longer Psalms. And so we're going to take a look at verses 17 and 18 today. And Psalm 49 is in book 2 of the Psalms, Psalms 42, Psalms 42 to 72, Psalms 42 to 49 are by the sons of Korah. You know that Korah rebelled against Moses and Aaron. In Numbers chapter 16, it says the ground opened and Korah and his family went down alive to Sheol. Fire from heaven swallowed up the children of Korah, the followers of Korah. The only ones that were left were called the sons of Korah. These were the followers of Korah who did not rebel, and we see them in Numbers chapter 26, verse 11. And, the sons of Korah were not only superintendents of the musical guild of the Jewish temple, they were also caretakers and custodians of the sacred vessels and vestments that were used in the worship of God in the temple. And, of course, Korah in Hebrew means baldness. Interesting. So the prescript of this Psalm, Psalm 49, is the entire first verse of the Psalm. It says, Lemenzeach livni Korah mizmor, or for the choir master of the sons of Korah, a psalm. So verse 17, I love this psalm, by the way. It's about not focusing on the materialism of the world, but focusing our attention on our faith in the Lord God. It says, verse 17, then do not fear when a man grows rich, when the glory of his house increases. Right? So sometimes that happens. We get envious. We get jealous of people who, like, for example, win the lottery, or they come from, they've inherited something, or the business, the wealth from their parents were passed down to them. Or we see someone running a successful business, and, we see kind of the lifestyle that they're living. And we get a little envious. We get a little jealous, like, man, and Korah, sons of Korah, telling us, hey, don't worry about that. Don't fear. Not become afraid, but don't lose the fear of the Lord. So fear is Yareh in Hebrew, which means honor, reverence, and respect. So don't become unfocused on the Lord in your life because you see someone else, in a sense, prospering materially more than you. Because even though they may have material wealth and fame and fortune and those kinds of things, they may be poor spiritually. So Korah is asking us here to emphasize more on the spiritual richness. And why? It says here in verse 18, so the person who grows rich, he takes nothing with him when he dies. His glory does not follow him below. Right? And so, you know what this reminds me of when Jesus talks about when he's preaching. He says, you can't take it with you. Don't focus on the things of this world, but focus on the world to come, the things of the world to come. St. Paul talks about this in Romans and in other of his letters too. Focus on the spiritual and not really the material. Because why? You can't take it with you. You build up all this wealth. Jesus talks about this, right? The man who wants to sell all he has and to buy the field and build these silos to put all his grain in, but he's going to die the next day. And then what happens to all that stuff? It goes to someone else, and it doesn't carry over as far as giving him the spiritual wealth that he needs in order to get to heaven, to be with God forever. That's where our wealth should be. That's where our investment of our life should be. Yes. So, sometimes maybe God has blessed you with material wealth in order to share.
For more on the Psalms with Deacon Harold Burke Sivers, check out Beacon of Truth weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and streaming everywhere you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to the Catholic Momcast. Join us each week as our friends from CatholicMom.com and special guests gather to chat about all things faith, family, and fun. From the latest news in our community to the latest trends in our homes, we invite you to join the conversation.
Welcome to another episode of Catholic Momcast. I'm your host, Maria Johnson, and I'm so excited to share with you some really, really cool stuff today. We have as our guest today Donna Kimball, who is the Emmy-nominated puppeteer of a new family theater production and Minnow Christians Media puppet series, Guillermo and Will.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, Donna. Tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Maria. Hi, Maria. Hi, Catholic Moms. So I'm Donna Kimball. I'm based here in Los Angeles. I'm a mom. I'm a puppeteer, and a kids media performer and producer. And I've been a puppeteer for over 30 years now. I can't believe it. And an actor for longer than that. And a writer and now a content creator. And I'm just delighted to be here to talk about Guillermo and Will.
I just need to know, what is a puppeteer?
Oh, a puppeteer is like the best job ever. But I'm a little biased. It's just endlessly creative. If you've ever seen Sesame Street or the Muppets, that's what I do. I've worked for the Jim Henson Company. I've worked for Sid and Marty Krofft, and a number of other companies. So it's basically animation. We are taking an object that has no life and giving it life, giving it personality, giving it thoughts, giving it words. It's endlessly creative. I've played little boys, obviously. I've played old guys. I've played spiders. I've played talking books. I've played pretty much anything. So
I'm kind of stuck on the spiders. So that's your creative modality, I guess, right? It's you do puppets. So how did you bring this to life in a new series, Guillermo and Will?
Well, I had hit a milestone birthday and I knew that I wanted to get into content creation. I knew I wanted to take all the stuff that I'd learned in my puppetry career, the writers that I worked with, the producers that I worked with, just the brilliant minds, and the crew that I worked with, who are just so smart and so good at what they do, and bring them along with me. And I had the idea that I wanted to create material for this audience, because not a lot of puppeteers that I knew were doing this. And I felt like this is an audience that deserves great production values, just like any other audience. I really wanted to branch out into an area that doesn't see a lot of professionals in Hollywood working in this area. So I really wanted to change that.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I'll tell you that what really piqued my curiosity about this show is that I am fully bilingual. I was raised bilingual. I'm a first generation. Actually, I'm technically first generation. I'm technically an immigrant, but I came so young that I really have the characteristics of first generation. And we tried to pass on the Spanish language to our children. And now I'm getting to see a little bit of that in our grandchildren. But, there's a little bit of dilution of the language in just about every immigrant story. And so to have this particular show that is bilingual and it's bicultural and it's beautiful. Tell us how did you come to this idea? Why this particular audience?
That's a very interesting question because I'm a listener. I'm a very white lady and I grew up in the American South. So for me to have this idea might seem a little like, but it really comes from my friendship with Dan Garza, who plays Guillermo. Dan and I met doing a PBS show called Splash and Bubbles at the Jim Henson Company, and we just clicked immediately. We just became fast friends. And when actors and therefore puppeteers are not working, you get together and have coffee and bash out ideas and support one another and tell each other, you got this, like we do. And I had said to Dan at this one particular brunch, you're one of those rare bilingual puppeteers. There really aren't that many at all. It's like, what about you're creating a show that is bilingual? And Dan at the time was working on something else and he wasn't super interested, but I left that brunch going, I want to do a bilingual show with Dan. Dan is my buddy. He's my amigo.
Whether or not he was on board at the moment.
Yeah. Oh no, I had to drag him on later. No, it was fine. No, he came along willingly. And then, I had met Minnow and pitched them a big show. And then COVID hit. And we all were dealing with that. So they were looking at smaller shows like pocket shows. And they said, do you have anything smaller that we could shoot, safely, maybe shooting in at your home? And I said, yeah, maybe we'll do a bilingual show with Dan, but we'll tailor it for this Christian audience. And then I was on a walking just in my neighborhood during the pandemic, and the title came to me, The Adventures of Guillermo and Will. And I literally stopped in my tracks and let out a big sigh and thought, wow, I just received a bolt from the blue, an inspiration totally that I believe was from God. And I was just like, that's it. They are the same kid. They are two versions of the same kid. They have the same name. They are the same species. They're both worms, but their colors are different and their language is different. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. But they are the same kid. And what they have in common, what unites them is greater than their differences. But their differences are cool and their differences are observed and celebrated. But it really is about what they share, which is a love of exploring, a love of each other, and a love of God and God's world.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. I live in a what is called a super diversity neighborhood.
Oh yeah.
Where there's a lot of different countries, different faiths, different backgrounds of people. And so it's lovely to see that come onto the screen. That's not the case in all areas. I think that we tend to kind of be around people that are like us, but you go into the world, and you encounter all kinds of folks. And the commonality that we have is, in fact, that we are all really the same fundamentally.
Yes.
And of course, in our audience, that we understand that we are children of God. And so that's where our true identity is. So how are you weaving these biblical truths into a story that is fun and entertaining?
The fun part actually comes the easiest for Dan and me because we really enjoy each other. But from the beginning in my discussions with Minnow, I was more excited about bringing social emotional learning curriculum into this space rather than telling Bible stories, because I feel like there are other creators who are great at that, who excel at that. But for myself, I really was excited by modeling for children what it is like for kids living their lives in the world to have that informal relationship with God, so that God is always present with them. Something cool happens, you go, thanks, God. That's my best friend. Thank you, God, for my best friend. I see something beautiful in the world, a gorgeous sunset or a beautiful autumn tree with fiery colors. And I think, wow, God's world is just beautiful. And so that's what these kids are doing. So rather than Bible stories, which is you find plenty of those on Minnow, this is really just, it's like a day in the life of a Christian kid. And the fact that God is right there with them as they're living their best lives as kids.
I love that you're just making it a natural kind of day.
Exactly.
Or a natural existence. I sometimes when I think about my own writing, I say, well, list all of the things that I am. And one of them is Catholic. And so I try to present myself as implicitly Catholic as opposed to explicitly Catholic. And it sounds like that's where you're going with this. I'm really delighted to hear that you also brought in some professionals that had some consultation in terms of early childhood development and language education. Why did you think that was important to incorporate?
Oh, well, we wanted to get it right. We wanted to get, of course, the language right. But, with the language element, we wanted to create a full experience for a kid who speaks only English and a kid who speaks only Spanish. So yeah, either of those kids will watch an episode of Guillermo and Will and know exactly what's going on. And they're also seeing that these two kids are making an effort to learn each other's language. So Will speaks a little bit of Spanish and Guillermo speaks a little bit of English. So they're really seeking to understand one another. If that answers your question. I think I may have gone on a tangent.
No, I think it's absolutely fine. I mean, you have a really illustrious career and have worked in some really amazing areas. How is this a dream finally realized for you? I mean, what does this show mean to you personally?
Wow. Well, of course, it's a professional milestone to have sold a show because creators pitch shows all the time. But when someone actually buys the idea and buys the intellectual property and makes it, it's rare. So there's that. There's the professional milestone. But personally, it's just so. It's astounding to me to walk on set back in April when we were shooting. And we have a small crew of 14. Most of them I've worked with before on other shows. All of them are so good at what they do. Most of them are parents themselves, bringing their kids to set. And just feeling that sense of humility and responsibility, with great power comes great responsibility. It's like, ooh, I have to make this show. I want to make sure everyone gets home so they can have dinner with their families. I want to make sure everyone gets paid. So just to have a dream, literally something you're imagining in your head and that comes to you on a walk in your neighborhood and have it made real is an incredible feeling. I can only liken it to the birth of my kiddo.
Oh, wow.
But they're very, very different
That's
things.
Big.
But it's like something in my head that's now real. And I feel so blessed and fortunate and to be with Minnow and FTP on this journey. It's been just tremendous.
That's fabulous. How did you connect with Family Theater Productions?
Through Minnow.
Okay.
I had heard about Minnow from a friend, and I knew they were based in Nashville, and that's where I grew up. So I met with them, and we were in touch about things. Of course, then the pandemic hit, as I said. And then Minnow reached out to me and said, we may have found a producing partner for Guillermo and Will. And they're attracted to the show because of the dual language aspect. It was what drew them. So they told me about Family Theater and told me about the documentary Pray, Story of Father Peyton. And I watched it that day and was
wonderful.
Wow. I thought, first of all, the documentary was a fantastic documentary. And I was just riveted and thought, oh, I can't believe I get to work with these people. Just amazing. And I sent that documentary to my parents. Oh. Literally, all this happened the same day, and said, Mom, my mom is 86. Mom, you got to watch this. And you and my stepdad watch it together, like right now. They watched it and called me back and said, what an amazing man. Like, I know, I get to work with these guys. So I
Mother
was
Peyton is
just
something else.
Yeah, I was just over the moon to get to work with them, and we shot there at Family Theater too. So
that's cool.
It was great to go there every day for a while.
So I have I guess a technical question. How do you bring to life a worm?
Well, that's a really good question. If you look at Slimy on Sesame Street, the little worm puppet on Sesame Street, he's Oscar's pal. You'll notice that Slimy has rods that come from underneath. So the puppeteer is under that set, manipulating that worm. For our show, I'd never seen this before, but I knew there was so much physical comedy that we wanted to get Guillermo and Will doing and all their physical antics, that we had to have the rods coming from the top. And so I had some brilliant puppeteer makers that I've worked with for decades, creating these puppets. So the full body puppets are about 8 inches long. They have 2 rods coming from the top of their bodies at the tail, and then just sort of at the back of their neck. And there's a trigger that opens their mouth so they can talk, these full body ones. And then for close-ups, we have what we call the half body puppets. And that's a regular like Muppet style puppet. That's the puppet from the waist up. So we're cutting in between those two. So for the wide shots, we have the mini worms doing all these crazy things like trying to go up a slide and sliding back down, and jumping in a doll-sized car and taking it for an imaginary spin, and then punching in for close-ups with the hand puppets. So you'll notice when you watch the show how we bounce back and forth between these style of puppets.
That's fun. And you just do regular takes like in with human beings, right? I'm just, wow, what a fun way to go to work.
You know what? It's great. And it's very technical, of course, puppetry, because if you've seen any behind the scenes of any Jim Henson things or Muppets, you see that the puppeteers are looking at monitors. So we see what the camera sees. So we're always composing the shot. We're always filling frame the right way. We're always kind of assisting the director in making the shot look good and hitting a mark. But it's a very technical form of on-screen acting. Yes, it is.
I love to hear that. And I can't wait to share this with my littles. When is this going to be available?
October 10th is when the first 5 episodes will drop on Minnow. And then on October 17th is when the back 5 episodes will drop. And they're short episodes. They're about 6 minutes long.
Oh, that's just the right length, I think, for the attention span. Well, if you could speak directly to the parents, what would you say to them?
Oh, I just hope that everyone takes the show with the spirit that it was intended, with just love and brotherhood and love your neighbor, golden rule, just all the big stuff, the big tent stuff of Christianity, that these just 2 little worms are loving life, loving God, loving each other, and living their best little kid life. I hope that they have joy and humor, and that in watching it with their child, they will just later, when their kid is playing with something and something cool happens, and then for the kid to maybe look up and say, "Thank you, God. Gracias, adios."
Oh, that's beautiful.
That would be wonderful.
Well, where can we find out more about this?
You can go to gominnow.com, which is the site for Minnow. And as far as streaming services go, Minnow is quite inexpensive compared to many, many others. So, and there's a lot of great content on the Minnow platform. It's like a little Netflix for Christian kids.
I love this. Well, thank you, Donna. It has been a pleasure getting to know you today and finding out a little bit about puppetry art. That's an exciting career to have. Thanks for joining us, and thank you, listeners, for joining us to this episode of Catholic Momcast. And we'll be back next week with more exciting content.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thanks for listening. To join the conversation, please send your comments, ideas, or any feedback to editor@catholicmom.com. We welcome your reviews at your favorite podcast service to help us continue to improve and grow this community. The Catholic Momcast is a CatholicMom.com production, brought to you by Holy Cross Family Ministries with audio by Room 2 Productions. All rights reserved.
Introducing two very lovable puppet friends, Guillermo and Will, their adventures of joy and beauty as we cross culture, friendship, and faith. Great stuff from the Catholic Momcast. You can subscribe wherever you like to stream or simply go to Podcast Central at EWTN.com/podcast to catch full episodes. I'm Ace McKay. Plug it out, going home, enjoy your weekend, and remember to let God define who you are. And I'll see you again with Catholics Coast to Coast.